So I'm delighted to be here to talk about my failures. And what do I mean by that? So the reason we wanted to put this on the program is, in some sense, there's a selection problem. Okay, and the selection problem is this. So you come to our website, you see a beautiful briefcase, a JPAL study. This one was done with me and my colleagues Rima and Jordan and Sudarno Sumarto from the Indonesian government, who is with us today. And you see this beautiful study. We were looking at improving citizens' information, and it worked. We did the study, it worked great, we had great results, it led to policy change. But what I wanted to tell you today is not that this is a very selected sample. And the research process itself, the process that all of us as JPAL researchers go through, is actually a lot more nonlinear than this. It has a lot more fits and starts. And we thought it would be useful to show you kind of, in some sense, what actually happens across the whole portfolio of things. So not selecting on the final sample of the projects that work out, but going the other way to say, from the projects we actually start, what happens. So that's what I want to talk about today. And in particular, when I was coming up with this talk, I opened up my laptop, and I went to my Dropbox folder, and I have a Dropbox for every single project. And I went back to all of the projects, not the ones that worked, but all the projects that actually had started. Gotten to the point where we'd actually made a Dropbox folder, had meetings, started the project in various forums, and it turns out there's a lot more of my project, a lot more Dropbox folders for projects that didn't work than the projects that did. So here's an example of all the different ways my projects have died. And actually, I will admit that these are not all RCTs. I have some non-RCT ones here too. Here are some examples of how some of these died. So for example, sometimes I do economic applied theory. We tried to write a theory project. The model was too hard, or it was untractable, it was uninteresting. My favorite of the theory ones is the theorem that turned out not to be true. We worked on this one for 6 months until we found a counterexample. So that was the end of that. Couldn't get the data. I'm sure you can all imagine that. Couldn't find a natural experiment. We had an idea. We were looking around. Couldn't find a setting for it. Nobody responded to the treatment. We had a great idea. We brought it out there, and nobody took it up. So we couldn't really study that. Didn't have enough statistical power. It was there was too much noise in the world. We couldn't actually get a signal. I'll come back to this one. Couldn't convince a partner to do something that we thought was a really great idea. I'll come back to that too. Couldn't find the right field setting. We had an idea. We thought it would work, and we couldn't quite connect it with kind of the realities of the field. Field visits revealed something totally unexpected. That's a little bit related to the project was completely misconceived. I'll come back to that too. This one happens all the time for any of you who work with governments. That we talk about the scale-up successes, but actually sometimes you have a policy champion and they get moved to a different ministry, and unfortunately then your project kind of sometimes takes some setbacks. That happens with governments, partners, bureaucracies. Couldn't agree on data sharing rights. Actually, one thing that's really important for us is that we have the right to publish our results, kind of good or bad, and not all partners are willing to agree with that, and I've had to walk away from projects for that reason, unfortunately. Or in some sense, this one happens when your partner gets so excited, this is a great idea, that in fact they're just going to run and do it before we even test it. That happens sometimes too. And of course, the most recent one was the global pandemic. So that, where a lot of things changed. So I've only got a few minutes. I can't go through. There's a real project behind each and every one of these. I don't have time to do all of them. So I'm going to pick 3. Okay. And tell you what I mean by this. So here's an example of a project that was totally misconceived. So we had this idea that there were so many failed water projects in the world. So you see these images, you read these reports of wells that were built by some well-meaning NGO, and 3 years later the well is dry. Okay? And I see people nodding their heads, right? That's a problem. And we said, okay, maybe the reason is that the whoever is doing it, the international NGO, the government, they build the project, but they don't set up a system to make sure the thing is maintained. So we were going to do a project on fixing the maintenance of these water projects so they would be actually maintained. So that was the idea, and we worked with we had some government buy-in, some World Bank buy-in at the time. So the way we started this was, okay, let's try to understand the setting better. So we paired up actually a PhD student from MIT and one of our research associates from Indonesian research associate from our Indonesia office, and they went around. I came to some of these to do a bunch of field visits to sort of see what was actually going on, and is this hypothesis actually going to work? Here's what we found. So here are some examples of some water projects. The first place we went, we said, okay, well, uh, of the 12 villages in this subdistrict, 8 of them had chosen to build water projects, and they all work. No problem. Okay, so maybe actually so we couldn't really find a problem. In the second one, we actually went and said, well, gee, why are they working? And we actually did a lot of sort of qualitative research. I'm not going to detail this at all, but this is actually I dug this up from my field notes, and they actually said, our original hypothesis they'd come in and built the project with no maintenance was totally false. They had come in, they had set up a maintenance committee, they had dues, everyone was paying their dues, they'd used the money to sort of maintain the project. They had a whole system in place for actually maintaining this water project. And so I think in that case, we had this anecdote of the failed water project, but actually we went and systematized and looked around, at least in this context we were interested in Indonesia, it wasn't. Actually, it was just fine. And so we stopped. That was the end. No project. Okay, failed project number 1, we had the wrong idea, and when we confronted it with kind of the reality in the world, it wasn't actually a problem. So that was the end of that project. Here's a second example. A second example is finding the right research setting. So we had I've done a lot of work on helping. How do you identify who's poor? And one of the things we've worked on is this idea of self-selection. Can you design mechanisms where the poor kind of are going to self-identify and figure out, let you know kind of that they're really in need of assistance. And so we also, on a separate matter, we also do a lot of work on bureaucracies and helping the government recruit people who are going to be really effective at their jobs. And we said, maybe we can kind of marry these ideas somehow. Maybe we can say, is there a way to use self-selection mechanisms to get the right people who are really motivated to do this government job to be the ones the government hires? And so we think this is a really promising idea. So we had a couple of ideas. First, we heard that the Ministry of Social Affairs in Indonesia was about to hire thousands and thousands of facilitators for their conditional cash transfer program. So we put together a slide deck. We met with the Ministry of Social Affairs. They said, yes, we're actually hiring all these people. It's a big recruitment possibility. It's a challenge. But at the end of the day, they said, you know what? Nice idea, not for us. Okay, so we stopped. But this idea was sort of still percolating in our head. And so we were, about a year or two later, we were working with a different ministry in Indonesia. We were working with the ministry that runs the insurance program for workers' compensation and things like that. It's called BPJS Ketenagakerjaan. And we actually went in to meet with them about one of the things. They said, actually, you know what? We really need your help on is this. We're starting this new program. It's called the Perisai program, and we're going to have a whole network of kind of grassroots insurance agents. And the problem we have is that we're going to, these people who are going to recruit people into this government kind of system of providing workers' compensation, insurance, and other things. We're going to recruit all these this says, by the way, says needed, these Perisai agents. We're going to recruit, hundreds or thousands of these agents, and they're going to go and sort of bring everyone into the insurance program. And they said the problem we have is that people don't really know what the job is like. They come, we train them, we spend a lot of effort on this, and then they quit. So we're like, okay, great setting. It's exactly relevant to us. We can help design an experiment for you to help you make sure you get the right people who are going to be really motivated to your program. And so we worked with the insurance agency. Or with the government insurance agency, we developed a whole protocol for how you were going to use these self-selection ideas to get the right people. We actually launched a pilot in 5 districts in Indonesia. Here I am actually helping train the people in the pilot. We actually recruited a bunch of people. We piloted it. And in the end of the day, I think what they discovered was this was a really interesting idea, but it was just it slowed them down too much. It was too logistically cumbersome. And so we never did an RCT on it. It stopped. So that's it. I'm not done with my whole talk, but that's it for that one. We're still looking. We think this is a really promising idea, but we haven't yet found a setting that actually is going to work. And this is sort of I think this is a natural part of both of these are examples of the natural part of the learning process. The first one, we check our idea in the field. We sort of see if it is a good idea or not. Sometimes it is great, but sometimes it's not. This example, it seemed like a really good idea. The government was interested, but it turned out it was too logistically challenging to actually go through. So I'm going to tell you a third example, which at least has a happy ending, which comes from this example. So sometimes policy change happens before you're ready, and sometimes actually there can be some successes there too. So in this example, again, you can see most of my work is in Indonesia, working with the Indonesian government. And so in this example, we have been working with the vice president's office, Sudarno Sumarto from the vice president's office, who's here today. And we were working with the Indonesian government on their subsidized rice program. So they give subsidized rice to millions of poor households across the country, and they've had all kinds of challenges with the subsidized rice program. The rice is not high quality. Sometimes it doesn't go to the right people. And the idea they had was that they were going to replace this, handing out millions of tons of subsidized rice in bags of rice every month with debit cards that could be used for people to sort of purchase rice at local stores. And they did a really small scale pilot in the city of Jakarta of this. It seemed like it was going to work. And they said, well, we'd love your before we kind of scale it up nationally, we would like to work with JPAL to understand is this actually effective before we do it. And so working actually with Papi Widyasari, who's also here, Papi and I went to the field with our teams, tried to develop a whole kind of plan for a village-based randomization. We were going to go, they were going to introduce this kind of village by village and certain randomize which villages got it, which didn't get it, to be able to test the impact of this before the government scaled it up. So that was our plan, and we spent, I don't know, a year and a half maybe kind of developing this village-based randomization plan that was kind of ready to go. And then what happened was the government changed its mind and decided it was going to launch this thing at national scale. So the minister, the minister of the Republic of Indonesia said, okay, this thing is moving, it's going to happen. And so our whole plan for sort of village by village kind of went by the wayside. Now, and there, by the way, are the cards. So as I mentioned, though, this one actually has a little bit of a happy ending in the sense that actually when they were moving it to scale, actually one of our collaborators in the Ministry of Planning, who is someone we'd worked with for many, many years, came to us, actually meeting her when I was in Jakarta, and she said, Ben, I've been thinking about this rollout that we're doing. We're going to scale, but we're going to do it district by we have to roll out the districts. It's going to take us some time to get the whole country ready, and Indonesia's a really big place. We have 500 and something districts, so it's going to take some time. And she said, I think phase one is happening. Phase one district's happening year one. Phase two districts happening year two. But I don't have enough money in my budget to do all the phase two districts in year two. Some of them are going to have to go in year three. And she said, do you think you guys could do a randomized trial to evaluate the impact of that? And I said, yes, Vivi, we definitely can. And so working together with the Vice President's office and with the Ministry of Planning, we worked that they basically randomized the whole kind of rollout of this program district by district in this middle phase. And so we were able to do sort of a nationwide randomized trial of kind of these debit-based vouchers instead of handing out the rice. And actually, so we had treatment control all across the Indonesian archipelago. And the answer, when we found out, was it was extremely successful. Actually, this program actually led to substantial reduction, increases in rice and subsidy going to the poorest households, and substantial reductions in poverty. And so in the end, I think this was a sort of our initial design that we had tried of the villages actually totally failed, but in the end, we were able to adapt. And actually, I think some pretty important results for government policy. And so, just what do I want to leave you with? What I want to leave you with is this. The research process is iterative. It's much more iterative than you think. The selection problem that I started with is really there. It's not every project that you try doesn't work, and actually it shouldn't work. We should be going through the process of making sure what we find actually is connected to the realities on the ground, that it's practically feasible, and actually it's consistent with kind of the policies that we're trying to do. And I think that having that flexibility and adaptation is really important. And also, I just want to end with, if we aren't failing, we're probably not taking enough risks. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.